The Rams tried to trade Davante Adams, and could the A.J. Brown to the Rams trade still happen? Jauan Jennings a Ram? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On Rams, part of the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've covered LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleach Report, SI, Dodgers Nation. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's going to be entering his 12th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, we're talking about Davante Adams and the rumors that the Rams were exploring a trade for him. The Rams actually put out a little clever tweet kind of addressing it. We'll talk some A.J. Brown, and also what needs do the Rams have to still address, and who are some realistic free agents they can still sign. But Travis, I think we'll start with the Davante Adams stuff. So Davante Adams, we know he really stabilized the Rams receiver room. He led the league with 14 touchdowns. He was a massive red zone threat. But Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, he reported that the Rams were considering moving him. Now, this is really interesting just because this was coming on the heels of these late week A.J. Brown to the Rams rumors. And I think the big takeaway here is, even though it's basically certain that Davante Adams is going to remain a Ram, and it's unlikely that they'll trade for A.J. Brown, and even if they do consider going down that road, it won't be up until June 1st. They clearly aren't happy with their wide receivers room completely, entirely.
Yeah, it was surprising. When you saw the rumors about Davante Adams, it was one of those things that made you go, wait, that Davante Adams? Why would you want to move on from a guy, like you mentioned, had just led the entire league in receiving touchdowns? He certainly was exactly what I think the Rams were hoping that they were going to get when they brought him in at the beginning of last season. And then you start to think about it, and then it makes a little bit more sense. I don't think it's something that you would be dying to do, but I do think that the Rams are pretty good at exploring options, at keeping all of their options open, and considering, the ability to get better at a position, even at a position that maybe you were really good at to begin with. And I don't know if Adams and Brown go together exactly, but Adams is one of those guys that I think was incredibly valuable. But if they think they can get a little more explosive, if they think they can get a little more dynamic, I'm not saying they would do it, but I do think that they would kick the idea around. Now, where it gets a little bit complicated is, what happens if that actually was discussed? What happens if you did have a meeting somewhere where the idea was floated, not that it was on the 1 yard line, but you really did have a conversation about, hey, should we do this? Could we do this? How do we get better? What do we get back? What are the risks? And then Davante Adams calls you on it and says, hey, did you think about trading me? Were you considering trading me? How do you answer that question? Do you just say flat out no and hope that it never gets out and he goes back to work and he takes your word for it? Do you say not at this time? Do you say not at the moment? Do you say, yeah, we were doing it? Because anything other than a flat denial, I think, could really kind of put him in a space that maybe you don't want him in. That maybe, Davante was a pro's pro last year and did exactly what you're hoping, but just the idea of somebody maybe not wanting to have you on the team anymore can, be one of those things in the back of your head that starts to fester a little bit. Why didn't they want me? Well, they don't want me. I don't want them. All of the things that come along with that. So I do think it's a pretty interesting situation for a guy that obviously was an incredibly important part of their team last year. And I think everybody was thinking would be an incredibly important part of their team coming up in 2026. And yet here we are talking about whether or not they were at least considering the possibility of trading him.
A couple of things, Travis. First, I found it really interesting that a couple hours after that rumor surfaced from Mike Florio, the Rams Twitter account just randomly put out a video that was Sean McVay introducing these highlights and breaking down Davante Adams' film. And it really didn't say very much other than it was basically around the same time this year. So that to me wasn't by accident. I think that was the Rams saying, okay, did we have these talks? We're not saying we didn't, but we're also kind of basically giving a vote of confidence of Davante Adams and showing the Rams him. I think Davante maybe, I don't want to say comes off sensitive or anything like that, but look, I mean, all these athletes, they have egos, they can be fragile at times, and you definitely, if you have some ability to kind of show them, hey, we still got love for you, we're not moving on from you or anything like that, it can help. But Travis, did we not see this from this organization last offseason? They moved on from a player where it's not hyperbolic to say is a Rams legend in Cooper Kupp. A player that was the Super Bowl MVP for Sean McVay in Super Bowl 56. A player that is very close to Matthew Stafford. Just like you and I have Locked On Rams. They had Nine and Dime. They have a podcast together. The Rams are not afraid to make difficult decisions if they feel like it's going to better their football team. And I got news for Rams fans that are denying this, or just anyone that thinks that this wasn't considered. I agree with you. It wasn't close to be on the 1 yard line or anything like that. But if they can move off of Cooper Kupp, they certainly can at least have conversations about going a different direction with Davante Adams.
I think that's exactly right. Look, I in the history of the Los Angeles Rams version 2.0, since they came back in 2016, I think there's been exactly one guy who probably has been untouchable, who just under no circumstances, don't call me, I'm not listening, we're not doing, and that was Aaron Donald, right? He was the only guy that I think you would say is completely off the table. They traded Jared Goff after he took him to the Super Bowl. They got rid of Todd Gurley after they paid him a whole bunch of money. You mentioned Cooper Kupp along the way. Davante Adams has been here for a single season. Now, he was really good. This almost has nothing to do with Davante the individual. This is just kind of a point to show how they operate. Now, to your point, no one's saying anything bad about Davante. It's just that position and players like Adams can be sensitive, can be, aware of the surroundings. And I don't think that he's going to see a video or anything else and be like, oh, everything's fine. It's what's going on upstairs. It's what does he think? Does he believe that he was never on the trade block? Then everything's fine. If he has even a little bit of a consideration of, man, I wonder what they were doing. Now, what's going on inside his head? Now, he's a pro. He's going to show up. He's going to work. I don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. But I really do think that when it comes to guys getting their name put in trade rumors, it's difficult. Now, Adams has been around a long time. He's been a part of this league a long time. He knows how these things go, but that doesn't mean he's completely immune to the thoughts that can come along with seeing your name in a rumor like this.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps. I mean, he was on the Raiders. He was on the Jets. He understands football is a business. Even for great players in this league, as you mentioned, you either have to be basically top 5 at your position in your very prime. And outside of that, it's like there's a salary cap and you can't have every player, right? You have to make decisions and choices. And for me, I found it really interesting because, I mean, after our show Friday, that's when the A.J. Brown stuff came out. I did a little quick thing about it. And initially the hope was, wow, they're just trying to get an incredible wide receiver 3, but essentially they're all WR1s across the board, right? They're all aces in the rotation, kind of, so to speak. But now this leads me to believe that this was kind of more of an interchangeable thing. Would they have chosen A.J. Brown over Davante Adams and then look for another wide receiver 3 or something in that category? So that's where I find it really interesting because Davante Adams, yes, I'm going to talk a little about his production in the next segment, but vibes-wise, like off the charts. I mean, this is a guy who played with prime Aaron Rodgers and said last year that was the most fun he's ever had playing football. And then A.J. Brown, we know the drama that he's caused in Philly. Sure. So I think that's so interesting that the Rams heading into this all-in season where like I said before, I don't care if Matthew Stafford plays for another 20 years, you still have to approach it like it's year to year and it's his final year to take things that direction and mix things up that significantly. I found it to be very, very mind-blowing.
Yeah, I go back to what you said a second ago about the vibes, right? I think that's an interesting way to look at this because Davante Adams is the guy that you described. He's been around a long time. He's been in a lot of organizations. He's been pretty blanking fantastic everywhere that he's gone. He's the pro in the room, right? And I'm not throwing any cold water on Puka, but Puka, I feel like, needs some guardrails. He needs somebody else in there to kind of say, hey, yo, let's make sure we're doing this, that, and the other thing. And Puka's a great player, and Puka plays hard. And, you know, I haven't seen anything on the field that leads me to believe that Puka is anything other than a great pro. But I do like having a guy that, you know, just seems to be on his P's and Q's. And Davante Adams is. If you had a wide receiver room that was A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua and some young guys, I don't know, man. That feels like that could be volatile, shall we say, a little unpredictable. And having a player like Davante Adams there makes me feel a lot more comfortable. Just somebody that, like, to your point, has been around the block so many times, has had a great deal of success, has gone to other places that know how the league works, that having him around gives me peace of mind. So I'm glad that he's staying. He's a terrific player, and I think his leadership is important as well.
I do too, but I also think that this is a Rams team and Sean McVay and Les Snead, that they know the culture they've built, and it's pretty much bulletproof. And the reason why it's bulletproof is because they're so good at what they do, but they also know that, hey, if it came down to it, if things really got ugly, they would eat whatever they needed to eat to move on so it wouldn't disrupt. Now, obviously, you'd be without a player and things like that, but I think they really believe in their culture, and that's why coming up next, we're going to continue this conversation, because even though there's not an imminent trade set up for A.J. Brown, the Rams are reportedly still interested. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox is overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. We're talking about the right skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping that the right candidate stumbles across your job. And here's a stat that pretty much tells you everything you need to know. In the minute or so that we've been talking, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. We're talking less stress, less time, and more results. When you need to just get right to that person to cut through it all, that is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support Locked On Rams by saying you heard about it right here. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, want to give a big shout out to those everyday listeners out there, always rocking with us, no matter what, watching every episode, listening to every episode. If you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and check out the Everyday Club. Go to LockedOnRams.supercast today. You get ad-free audio wherever you get your podcast. You get exclusive merch, a members-only Discord. It's $5 a month or $50 for the year. Go check it out. Supports the show, supports the channel, and takes your Rams fandom to the next level. All right, Travis. So let's pick up on this juicy A.J. Brown rumor. So the Rams aren't completely out. They're not going to make a trade for him for now. It's been reported by Danny Rossini and Rappaport that, look, I broke it down yesterday's show, the financial implications for the Eagles if they would trade him now up until June 1st, they're very different. And also, if you're the Eagles, if you didn't trade him now, you wouldn't get draft capital for 2026. So you kind of push it down the line. So if I'm the Rams and I'm considering A.J. Brown at all whatsoever, I'm thinking a second round pick. I do not want to give it 2027 first. The Patriots are the other team that was linked to him. And we've seen a lot of times it's, the two teams mentioned, then he goes to some surprise third team. So I wouldn't be shocked if there wasn't another team out there that was at least showing some interest. But I think that we're going to enter this mode, Travis, where as long as he's still an Eagle and he isn't on another team, there's more than a 0% chance of A.J. Brown being a Ram when they start their season off in Australia this season.
Let me ask you this. And I'm genuinely asking, because I've been talked about this on my radio show with DeMarco. We were kind of talking about this with some of the other guys at the station. Does it give you pause that the Eagles, at least potentially, want to get out of the A.J. Brown business, that they are willing to move on from a player that is that effective, that is that dynamic, that is that, just gifted of an athlete? Does it worry you? Because look, if you just look at the guy, he's uncoverable. If you just watch it, him at his best, he's about as good as you're going to find in the entire league. And yet we're talking about him moving on to his third team potentially in his prime. And by the way, he's on a good team. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Last year, maybe wasn't their best year ever, but we know how hard it is to run it back and go and have a Super Bowl season after a Super Bowl season. We saw it right here. How worried are you just the fact that the Eagles, at least it appears, are willing to consider being out of the A.J. Brown business?
My response to that, Travis, is I consider Nick Sirianni versus Sean McVay. I consider Matthew Stafford versus Jalen Hurts. If Davante Adams was in that situation and he wasn't scoring 14 touchdowns, would he be saying that he was having the most fun that he ever had playing football? The answer is no. Wide receivers need to be kept happy, and it's a part of this league, right? There's an art to it, and I think that Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay can be Picasso in that, right? They are artists. They understand egos. They understand how to give guys what they want. And if I'm A.J. Brown and that Eagles offense was scoring 30-plus points a game and his numbers weren't great and he was still unhappy, then I'm saying, okay, this is a guy that cares more about his stats than he does winning. So that's just not the case. Like, that was an inept Eagles offense that was extremely frustrating. But the truth is, he's still incredibly talented. And I also look at the history of the Rams and their track record when it comes to taking guys that may have reputations as being head cases or disgruntled. Odell Beckham Jr. and Dominican Sue, Marcus Peters, even Jalen Ramsey had a pretty bad reputation when he came to the Rams. So I do think the fact that there was any interest lets me know that Leslie and Sean McVay have talked to coaches on other teams, have talked to scouts, have talked to players and say, what do you think about A.J. Brown? They've looked at the tape. They see the potential. They looked at how A.J. Brown took over the second half, really, against the Rams. Like, he's a physical freak. He truly is. And I always am interested when it comes to buy low, right? After the Max Crosby thing, I was like, oh, now I'm even more interested because I can get value out of this because it's more of a buy low thing. So the fact that to get back to your original question is, how do I feel about that? I look at the fact that this is not them trading A.J. Brown because they're a rebuilding team that needs to get assets. They're trading him because they think that he's not a good fit for them. So that's really good for the Rams. That means they can get him for, I think, a better value. And that's how my mindset would be.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think the fact that Sean McVay is here, I think the fact that Matthew Stafford is here gives me some peace of mind, knowing that if in fact that's something that they wanted to explore, that I struggle with my vocabulary here. I want to say keep him in line. That makes it sound far worse than it is. Keep him happy might be a better way of doing it, to make sure that he's getting what he wants. But look, you have a team that's got Puka Nacua, that in this situation, at least if you had him as a third, would have Davante Adams, or even if Davante is no longer here, you've got that room of tight ends. You've got Kyron Williams. You've got Blake Corum. You got a lot of guys that need to get their hands on that ball. And that at least seemed to be a part of why he was displeased with his role with Philly last year. And maybe it's a Jalen Hurts personality thing that they just don't jive together the way that it is. I don't doubt that Matthew Stafford can keep everybody healthy. You've heard me say this a bunch. I've said it on my radio show a lot, that you look at the seasons that Calvin Johnson had, that Cooper Kupp had, that Puka Nacua had, what they just did with Davante Adams, that Matthew Stafford and wide receivers, they get along great because they have some of the best years of their life when that guy's throwing them the football. But I always at least want to do a little bit of a hold on a second, why is he available kind of thing going on when there's a player that's that good that the team that has him is willing to move on. Like, every once in a while, you'll just see a player that is a really good player that can't seem to stay in one place for a particularly long time. That always gives me an opportunity to pump the brakes a little bit.
That's fair. That's understandable for sure. But let me ask you a question, though. Okay. Next season, what is the best version of this Rams wide receiver room? Is it current version of Puka Nacua, current version of Davante Adams, Maybe they draft a wide receiver 3. Maybe they pick one up in free agency, a Jauan Jennings type, someone like that. Who knows? Or would it be Puka Nacua, the current version of A.J. Brown that's happy in the best version of him at 28 versus Davante Adams at 33, and then maybe a drafted wide receiver or one they picked up in free agency? I know that Rams fans are not going to like this.
I know.
But I just want to point something out, though. And I love Davante Adams, right? I really do. But last season, he caught 71 of his 135 targets, 52.6%. So his lowest reception percentage of his career. Had 9 drops in 2025. That was the highest rate since his second season. He caught 10 of 34 contested targets. That was easily the lowest rate of his career. And then also you look at the yards after catch. This is a guy in his prime that was 500 plus yak. Last season, 161 yards after catch. That was the lowest of his career. And I'm not saying that he's washed. I still think he can be very productive, but I also think that a lot of people just see Davante Adams. I don't think there's that many players that look cooler in a uniform with their helmet on, with the visor and the Jordan gear than Davante Adams. And they just assume that they're getting peak prime Packers version of Tay.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this is where you got to really, really trust in your systems. You got to really, really believe in what it is that you're doing, and that what you are doing will keep guys that have at least the potential of going off the rails on the rails. Davante Adams works in LA, works really, really well, like we just said. AJ Brown probably works in LA, likely works in LA. I'm really interested to see if he would work in LA, but you're not quite sure. And like I said, just the extra that comes along with him gives me pause. Now, if you're saying pick one or the other, I think I'd pick A.J. Brown. I really do, for all the reasons you mentioned. He's younger. It feels like you still got a little more runway with him. You keep that window maybe open a little bit longer with a player like him. But I think there's, other than just the risk that comes along with every player in the league, I don't think there's a ton of risk with Davante Adams. And with A.J. Brown, I think there's some. I don't think it's a ton, but I think there's some as far as just him fitting. The first time he shows up with a book on the sidelines, okay, now what happens, right? Now, what's your move, Sean McVay? What's your move, Matthew Stafford? I believe that they would have a move. I don't think that they would get caught flat-footed with it, but that's stuff that they typically don't do here. We've talked about that a lot, and with Davante, you don't have to worry about stuff like that.
That's a good point. It does beg the question, though. I mean, look at Week 16. Davante Adams did not play. He was unavailable. The injuries aren't going to get less, right? I mean, the injuries get more frequent the older you get. So maybe that's another thing too. And also too, Travis, I think it's one of those things too for me. It's like Sean McVay, Les Snead, the brain trust of the Rams sitting around in a room saying, hey, we got a good situation. People have already said we've won the offseason with A.J. Brown. And people are like, dude, you guys are insane. You guys are crazy. And I'm like, they're like, yeah, heck yeah, we are. I like the fact that the Rams are a little crazy this offseason, and I think this is an example of that.
I think that they do the thing, and again, here you go. We're second segment, towards the end of second segment. Let's get the Dodgers in here real quick. I think the teams that are really good are never satisfied. They are never come like, okay, we've done enough. Let's see what happens. Let's just go play. They're always willing to look at ways to get better. They're always willing to look at ways to add more talent. They're always looking ways to kind of push the envelope forward, to push the outer limits of what a team can be. The Dodgers didn't need Kyle Tucker at all. They went out and got him anyway. The Dodgers could have run back Tanner Scott and said, hey, look, he's going to have a better year. He just had a weird offseason. We don't need a closer. We've already got one. Nope, they went and got Edwin Diaz. They just keep adding guys to an already incredible roster. And I think the Rams are similar as far as if they think there's a way to get better, even if they're already really good, they're going to at least talk about it, if not go all the way and do it.
Yeah, that's what these high achiever roster builds are all about. Unfortunately for the Rams, they can't just get anyone they want. No. Like the Dodgers can. The Dodgers are like, dude, we've got the mansion in Bel Air. We've got the yacht. We got the cars. We got the private island. And they're like, dude, we got to go to space now. Like, I want to go to space. Like, they're that billionaire that just wants to go to space because they have it all. I wish the Rams could do that, but that's just not in the cards with the salary cap. So, but I agree with you, though, as far as like they're trying to maximize the roster and they're not going to just be content. They're not going to leave any stone unturned. So I totally agree with that. Speaking of stones, we're going to mention one wide receiver 3 in the next segment. I kind of mentioned it earlier. We'll talk about him really quick. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. You've always known the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now you can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, so you mentioned the Dodgers. Well, speaking of time-honored traditions, we now have the contract that Tutu Atwell signed with the Dolphins. And real people money, great money, awesome money. You won in life. NFL money, it's about as low as you're going to get. Close to it, a $1.26 million guaranteed with a $187.5 $1,000 signing bonus, a $1.4 million value, a $1.215 million salary, the salary cap at 1.26. So the reason why I bring this up is not to have was Tutu Atwell disappointed with the Rams chat again. It was to point out that clearly the Rams weren't interested in him as a wide receiver 3, or maybe wanted to go back home in a different situation. We'll never know. But this is a low amount of money, and it didn't feel like there was any mutual interest to move forward with Tutu.
I feel this feels so gratuitous. This feels like you're just throwing me one right, like a fat, just spinning cement mixer in the middle of the plate that's not doing anything. Look, it was time, man. Like they gave him $10 million last year for doing nothing. So maybe they finally just decided that maybe a little more on top of that wasn't the right thing to do. I hope it works out for him in Miami. They're not paying him anything. I don't think they have any expectations. At about $1 million or so, or whatever it is, that number you said, million and change. I honestly, I don't know if I wouldn't do it again. I mean, that if you got, like you said before, if you paid $10 million to beat the Colts, would you do it? Yeah, sure. If you paid $1 million for 3 pass interference plays down the field, would you do it? Yeah, probably. I mean, if they hit in the right spot. So they missed. You know, I put it to you this way. I'm going to turn this into a positive. The fact that we can say that Atwell was as big of a miss as he was, and then the re-signing was as big of a mess as it was, or miss, I should say, mess or miss, take your pick, goes to show you how few of them they've actually had. That we can point to Atwell over and over again as the one that they got wrong, I think speaks to how few they get wrong. You know, it's that one, it's Logan Bruss. I'm sure there's one or two more, but the fact that we can kind of right off the top of your head say, if you were a fan of some other teams, you'd be like, well, they got this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one wrong. The Atwell one is the one that kind of sticks out. And if that's the worst move that they've made in the last 8 or 9 years, that's not that bad.
Yeah, we see him with the Allen Robinson move, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Stafford didn't have a lot of opportunities to build chemistry with him and things like that. Like, that's certainly for sure a possibility. But I think the interesting thing is kind of moving forward on the needs, right? They need a swing tackle, possibly a depth piece, another corner, the backup quarterback spot we talked about. But I think when the offseason is all wrapped up, the really interesting one where it's going to be who's that name? It's the wide receiver 3 spot. And an interesting name that you're kind of just seeing floated out there as far as for other teams is Jauan Jennings. Because Jauan Jennings, he was reportedly looking for a contract around $20 million per season. He's not going to get anything close to that. And it kind of makes you wonder, does he look at the Rams as a possibility to reset his market, go on a reclamation type of deal, and then you re-enter the market to try to get $20 million. I think if you are Jauan Jennings and you look at this offense, they're just going to be like through a course of a 17-game series, you're going to get your opportunities. And if you are good enough, it's a real meritocracy here with the Rams. I truly feel that way. And that would be a big-time name to go out to for your third best wide receiver.
And it's an opportunity to stick it to the Niners, right?
Most importantly.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for the Rams to stick it to the Niners, but more importantly, for at least for Jennings, at least, is for him to, you don't want to give it to me? Okay, well, I'm going to make you pay for it twice. Not only do you not have my services, but I'm going to turn around and use my skills to go and beat you. I think that, look, I get that Seattle is the defending champs, and they deservedly so. They were the best team last year. But when I look around, I still think San Francisco's the best team in the division that's not the Rams. They're the team that gives me the most pause. Adding Mike Evans, I think, was a really good move. They missed being the number one seed in the NFC by one game, and they played half the season with one hand tied behind their back. So anything you can do to kind of hobble them, I think, would be well done. And I don't know what Jennings has done against the rest of the league, but I know against the Rams, he's been absolutely incredible. So it would feel like he's one of those guys that could fit in really nicely in that third wide receiver spot. That's something that would be very interesting to me. I like that idea a lot.
For sure. And this would be our way of getting back at them for the Isaac Bruce situation.
There you go. Yeah.
Get it back for Isaac Bruce. But no, I totally agree. I think it's just going to be one of those fascinating things. It's like you think your roster's set, and then you kind of look at it and you look at what the Rams are pursuing this season. You realize there is still work to be done, and we're going to be monitoring it all off season. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA, and you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers, and catch him on his radio show, DeMarco and Travis, 3 to 6, ESPN LA. Go check that out for sure. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.